On that searing May morning in 1891, the dust of Crestwood, Montana, tasted like a promise broken. The Federated Church on Cedar Street stood stark white against the immense sky, its wooden cross a silent testament to a faith Cora didn't feel. Inside, 30 anxious faces waited, fanning the unseasonable heat. Outside, Cora Ashworth, 23, pressed her trembling hand against the rough-hewn hitching post, drawing in air that felt too thin to breathe. The wedding gown, a stiff silk prison dotted with seed pearls, was her mother's masterpiece, a 3-month-long monument to a life Cora was supposed to want. She'd made it halfway up the aisle. Reverend Miller's voice had droned through the opening prayer, but her eyes were locked on the groom, Elian Mercer, 29, owner of the thriving lumber mill, a man of solid prospects. A man who looked at her not with love, but with the measured calculation of a proprietor examining a valuable asset. Value, return, control. Her legs simply seized. The gasp from the congregation was a startled bird taking flight. Her mother's muffled cry was a sudden tear in the silence. Elian's expression, a flicker from confusion to cold, controlled fury, sealed her decision. But Cora was already moving. Skirts gathered, heart hammering, she chose the blinding sun over the velvet-draped altar. "Cora Eleanor Ashworth, stop this instant!" Her father's bellow cracked the air, a command she had obeyed all her life until this second. But her hand found the door, the hinges protesting her desperate escape. Sunlight flooded the vestibule, a fierce, glorious amnesty. She slammed the door shut behind her. The thud was a starting gun, a final, beautiful surrender. She leaned on the hitching post, fingers digging into the wood, and tore the veil from her hair. Pins scattered like tiny silver acts of defiance. Her fingers frantically worked the corset strings beneath the bodice, loosening the deadly embrace of expectation. The air rushed in, hot, dry, perfect air that smelled of sagebrush and distant cattle. Nothing like the suffocating incense and stale perfume of the church. Better to be the fool on the road than the queen in the cage. The thought settled her panic. She took the bouquet of wilting prairie lilies and dropped them carelessly into the water trough. Useless things. Inside, a storm of voices erupted. Elian would demand his dignity back. Her father would come for her, his fury a tangible physical force. How did you explain to them that marrying Elian felt like drowning on dry land? She looked east toward the limitless prairie where her aunt, Vera, lived with her husband on a dusty claim. 30 miles of nothing. Her satin slippers were a mockery. She bent, unlaced them, and placed them precisely beside the discarded bouquet. The warm, gritty earth felt honest beneath her silk-stockinged feet. "Don't look back, Cora," she whispered, stepping into the dirt road. The church bell tolled once, twice, 3 times, the hour that should have made her Mrs. Mercer. Each chime was a lock clicking on a life she had just escaped. She started walking. Part 2. The Rider in the Dust. The sun was a bruised orange fading into a bruised purple when Cora heard the hoofbeats. 4 miles out, maybe 5. Her feet were raw, the delicate silk of her stockings dark with dirt and seeping blood. The pearl-studded wedding gown dragged through the dust, its hem a testament to her foolish courage. "Ma'am," the voice was low, careful, and utterly devoid of judgment. Not her father's thunder, not Elian's sharp, demanding tone. She turned. A heavy work wagon, laden with feed sacks and coils of barbed wire, had pulled alongside her. The man holding the reins sat with the easy, economical grace of a born horseman. Canvas trousers, a faded chambray shirt, sleeves rolled to expose forearms corded with sun-darkened muscle. A hat that had seen 1,000 sunrises was pushed back on his head. Jericho Thorne. 31 years old, a lone rancher 10 miles northeast of town. A man she had dismissed with a condescending laugh 6 months ago when he had asked her father for permission to court her. A cowman who smelled of leather and lived too far from town. She'd chosen the clean, contained predictability of Elian Mercer. Heat rushed to her cheeks, not of the sun, but of pure, burning shame. She spun away. "I'm managing fine," she rasped, throat tight with dust and exhaustion. Jericho pulled the sturdy bay mare to a full stop. He climbed down, his movements deliberate and strong. He removed his hat, holding it against his chest, the gesture less polite than protective. Up close, she saw the fine lines around his gray eyes, the dust clinging to his dark hair, and the way his jaw was set, steady, unreadable, offering no pity. He didn't look at the dress, the dirt, or the blood. He simply looked at her. "Need a ride somewhere that ain't a church?" His voice was a low, resonant rumble. The simple question was a physical blow. No accusations, no demands for an explanation. Just an offer of grace on a dusty road. Cora pressed her lips together to keep from sobbing. "Only a few miles," she managed, voice thin. "My Aunt Vera lives on the old Callahan place. I won't trouble you long. Trouble's lighter when shared." He said it like a simple truth, like commenting on the wind. He walked to the back of the wagon, shifted a few feed sacks, creating a space near the front. Cora stood frozen. 6 months ago, she'd laughed at this man's ambition. Now he stood offering her salvation, while the man she'd chosen was in town collecting his ruined pride. "I don't deserve your kindness," she admitted, quiet and raw. Jericho's mouth quirked, not quite a smile. "Don't recall saying you did, but the sun's near to setting. It's 10 more miles to the Callahan place. You'll not make it before dark in those feet." He saw the blood that had soaked through her stocking. Without a word, he rummaged in a small box and returned with a clean linen rag. He handed it to her. She took it, wrapping it clumsily around her worst wounded foot. He helped her up into the wagon bed, his calloused hand rough but careful, his grip strong enough to lift her without bruising. He climbed back to his seat, gave a low click of his tongue, and the mare started forward. They rode in silence for a long mile. The prairie grass whispered in the cooling breeze. The wagon wheels creaked a steady song. Cora kept her hands folded, trying not to stare at his profile. Honest lines, strong chin, the kind of face that didn't have much to hide. "Heard you were marrying Ellie and Mercer today," Jericho said finally. A statement, not a question. "I was," she paused, a dry laugh escaping her. "I didn't. I expect the whole county knows by now. News like that travels faster than a bullet." He kept his eyes on the road, refusing to take the bait. She waited for the inevitable why, the question everyone would ask, but Jericho just rode, hands steady on the reins. "I couldn't do it," she blurted, the words rushing out, standing there, looking at him, knowing I'd wake up beside him for 50 years. It felt like a sentence. "Then you made the right choice." She turned, startled. "You don't even know why." "Don't need to," he said simply. "If you couldn't say yes, then no was the only honest answer you had." The knot in her chest finally dissolved. She looked away, blinking hard against the sudden threat of tears. The sun touched the horizon, a final, violent wash of crimson. "Thank you," she whispered, "for stopping, for not... Figured you got enough folks judging you already," he finished. "Don't need my opinion added to the pile." Thunder rumbled. Dark clouds, fat with rain, were rolling in fast. "Storm's coming in hard," Jericho said, his eyes scanning the horizon. "We're closer to my place than the Callahan homestead. 2 miles ahead to mine. 6 if we turn back for your aunt. Your choice." The thought of more riding, more pain, more exposure, made her shiver. But to accept shelter from this man she had scorned? "I don't want to impose," she said, throat dry. "You're not imposing. I'm offering. There's a small cabin, a spare room. You can rest tonight. Get those feet tended. I'll take you to Vera's in the morning." Nothing about this day had been simple, but the way Jericho said it made the impossible sound like a foregone conclusion. "All right," she whispered. "Thank you." Part 3. Sanctuary and Scars. Jericho's ranch, the Bar T, sat in a shallow, protective valley. The house was a sturdy, small wood frame, faded to a respectable gray. The barn, massive and practical, stood guard behind it. Jericho pulled the wagon up, just as the first fat drops of rain began to fall. He jumped down, offering his hand. The pain was a blinding fire as her feet touched the ground. She gasped, stumbling. Without a word, Jericho bent and scooped her into his arms. "Can't have you bleeding all over my clean floors," he muttered, but his tone was gentle. He carried her up the steps, pushing the door open with his boot. The front room was simple, a stone hearth, a couple of worn leather chairs, a braided rug. He set her down gently on the sofa, lit the side lamp, and a soft, warm light filled the space. "I'll get the fire going and heat some water," he said. He moved with an impressive, practiced efficiency, building a fire that caught almost instantly. She watched him work, a man whose life was built on capable hands and honest effort, the kind of life she had foolishly rejected. He returned, carrying a basin of steaming water, clean linen, and a small tin of salve. He knelt beside her feet. "This will sting," he warned. He unwrapped the blood-soaked rag and dropped it aside. Then, with movements so careful they felt almost reverent, he washed the wounds, patting them dry with soft cloth. He applied the salve, herbs and beeswax, smelling of earth and comfort, and wrapped her feet in clean, secure strips of cotton. "My mother's recipe," he explained, catching her eye. "Good for cuts and burns both." When he was done, he sat back on his heels, looking up at her. "You'll need to stay off them for a day or two. Let the blisters heal right." "I can't just—" "You can. Second door down the hall, clean sheets, window catches the morning sun. You're welcome to it as long as you need." He stood. "I'll fix us some supper." She sat alone by the growing fire, listening to the drum of the rain and the clatter of pots in the kitchen. In the corner, a small shelf held books, ledgers, cattle breeding guides, and a few dog-eared novels. On the mantel, a framed photograph of a stern, loving couple, his parents. It was a home built with intention. Jericho returned with 2 plates, thick beef stew and slices of fresh bread. They ate in a comfortable silence that felt more intimate than any conversation she'd ever had with Elian. "This is wonderful," she admitted. "Mrs. Hemlock made the stew at the Mercantile. I just heated it." He shrugged. "Still, thank you." "Can I ask you something?" she said, setting down her plate. "Go ahead." "Why did you stop after I turned you down flat 6 months ago?" Jericho leaned back, stretching his long legs toward the fire. "Because you looked like a wounded thing that needed shelter. Simple as that. But I was cruel to you." I laughed. Shame burned her face. "I'm sorry. I shouldn't have." "You weren't the first woman to pick the town man over the dirt rancher," he said, meeting her eyes. "I can't offer fancy dresses or hotel dinners. Some women want that. Nothing wrong with it." "There's nothing wrong with what you offer either," she said quietly. He held her gaze, testing her. "You believe that now?" "I'm starting to," she admitted. Honesty mattered more than pride right now. "Fair enough." He stood. "You should get some rest. Morning comes early on a ranch." He showed her to the spare room. "Nightshirt in the top drawer," he said from the doorway. "My father's. It'll be big, but it's clean." "Thank you." He paused, his eyes dark with something unspoken. "Cora, for what it's worth, I think you did the right thing today. Might not feel like it now, but walking away from a life that's wrong takes more courage than staying put." Before she could speak, he was gone. She closed the door, unlaced the wedding dress, and left it a fallen heap on the floor. She pulled on the soft, oversized nightshirt. It smelled of lye soap and fresh air. She climbed into bed, blew out the lamp, and listened to Jericho move around the house. She closed her eyes, and for the first time in a very long time, felt utterly, profoundly safe. Part 4. Unfinished Business. Somewhere in the deep hours of the night, she woke. She heard footsteps outside her door, pausing, then retreating. She padded to the window. In the pale moonlight, she saw Jericho's silhouette crossing the yard toward the barn. Even in the middle of the night, things needed tending on, the bar tea. She lay awake, the image of him moving with silent purpose fixed in her mind. A soft knock startled her a while later. "Cora, saw your light still on. Everything all right?" She opened the door. Jericho stood there, shirt unbuttoned at the collar, hair damp. "I can't quiet my thoughts," she admitted. "Regrets?" "No, the opposite. I keep thinking about how strange it is to feel so safe. It's what keeps me awake, wondering how I got so lucky to end up here, with you." The air thickened. Jericho's jaw worked. "Cora, I should let you rest." He made no move to leave. Neither did she. "What if I don't want to rest?" The words were reckless, a defiance of all the rules she'd ever known. His eyes, dark in the dim hall, held hers. "Don't say things like that unless you mean them." "I mean them," she whispered, stepping closer, close enough to feel the heat radiating from his body. "I've spent months doing what everyone expected. Tonight, I want to do what I want. Show me what you want, Jericho." His control visibly fractured. With a low, ragged sound, he cupped her face and kissed her. It was a kiss of overwhelming hunger and fierce relief. Her body, tired and bruised, came intensely, gloriously alive. She gripped his shirt, and he wrapped a powerful arm around her waist, pulling her flush against his hard, lean body. His lips left hers to trace a desperate path along her jaw. "Tell me to stop," he breathed, his mouth near her ear. "Don't stop," she whispered back. "Please." His control shattered. He lifted her, and she wrapped her legs around his waist. The thin cotton of the nightshirt, no barrier to the hard, undeniable evidence of his desire. He carried her to the bed, laying her down with a contrasting, exquisite gentleness. He braced himself above her, breathing raggedly. "You deserve better than this. Better than rushed and improper in the middle of the night. I deserve to choose what I want," she told him, pulling his face down for another kiss. "And I choose you." He rested his forehead against hers, fighting for composure. "I want you so much I can barely breathe around it. But Cora, I want to do right by you." The tenderness in his words was almost unbearable. "Then do right by me later," she whispered. "But for now, just hold me." He pulled back, his chest heaving, his eyes burning with unfinished fire. He pressed one more kiss to her lips, a soft, sweet, full-promise kiss, and forced himself away. "I should go," he said, his voice a rough rasp. "I know." He stood by the door, framed by the shadows. "This isn't over." "I certainly hope not." A ghost of a smile touched his mouth. "You're going to be the death of me, Cora Ashworth." "I'd rather be the life of you." He groaned, closed his eyes, and pulled the door shut behind him. Cora lay in the humming silence, her body vibrating with unspent desire, her heart singing a new reckless song. The rancher she'd rejected had just offered her a dignity she never knew she lacked. The following morning dawned clear, the light a brilliant antidote to the previous night's drama. Cora spent the day in the small, sunlit kitchen, her bandaged feet propped on a stool, mending a substantial pile of Jericho's work shirts. She was a city woman, but her grandmother had ensured she knew needlework. Her mother had insisted it was necessary for her future husband. Now, mending Jericho's clothes felt different. Less like obligation, more like an act of partnership. Jericho spent the day working the north fence line, but he returned at midday dusty and vigilant. His gray eyes swept the room, checking on her, before settling on the neat stack of repaired canvas. "Didn't expect you'd get through half that," he said, pulling off his gloves. "I'm good with a needle," she replied, meeting his gaze. "I can see that." They ate lunch, thick stew and fresh bread, at the small kitchen table. Their conversation was simple: cattle count, the risk of early summer drought, the cost of new posts. Simple, honest, and profoundly real. That evening, they sat on the porch swing, shelling peas under a sky painted in violent hues of pink and gold. "I've been thinking," Jericho said, breaking the comfortable silence. "Dangerous activity," Cora murmured, leaning her head on his shoulder. "About what happens next," he continued, his voice low. "The town's talking. Elian Mercer's a powerful man, and he doesn't take humiliation lightly. He won't just let you go, and he certainly won't forgive me." Cora straightened. Elian. The thought of his cold, calculating anger chilled her more than the night air. "What do you mean, he won't let me go?" Jericho turned to face her. "He didn't want you out of love, Cora. He wanted you for the land, the connections, the look of a proper wife. You walked out on his control. That's a debt he'll want settled with interest." "Is that a threat?" "It's Montana," Jericho said, his tone flat. "Mercer runs the mill, but he also runs the payroll for half the men in Crestwood. Some of those men ride with him outside of town limits. He's got friends who care less about the law and more about loyalty to the biggest wallet. I'm worried about the revenge he'll take on the rancher who helped you run." She reached out, placing her hand on his forearm, feeling the coiled muscle beneath the fabric. "If there is trouble, I won't hide. You didn't hide from me." He covered her hand with his grip strong. "Good, because I'm not asking you to hide. I'm asking you to stay." He paused, then took a deep breath. "Stay here, with me. Not as a guest just passing through. As my wife." Cora's heart hammered against her ribs. "Jericho, it's too fast. I just left a man at the altar." "I know it's fast," he conceded, But I also know that in the past week, I've felt more alive, more myself than I have in years. You fit here, Cora, you fit with me, and I'll take reckless and honest over careful and miserable any day. He stood and held out his hand. She took it, and he pulled her to her feet, then knelt right there on the dusty porch. Cora Ashworth, I'm just a rancher with calloused hands and a house that needs painting, but I can promise you an honest life, a warm home, and a man who will work every day to make you happy. Will you marry me? Tears blurred her vision. This man who saw her flaws and called them courage, who offered her reality instead of silk. Yes, she whispered, her voice thick. Yes, I'll marry you, Jericho Thorne. Part 6. The Confrontation. The next morning, before the sun was fully up, Jericho rode into Crestwood. Cora watched him go, a rifle secured beneath his saddle, a quiet certainty in his posture. He's not just going to the Reverend, she murmured to the empty room. He's going to face Elian. Jericho returned mid-morning. He walked in, his shirt dusted but his expression calm. I saw the Reverend, he announced, hanging his hat. Simple ceremony next Wednesday. We'll be married before the end of the week. And Elian? I met him at the Mercantile, told him you and I were getting married, told him any debt he felt was owed was mine to settle. He called me a dirty rancher, a thief, and a fool for marrying spoiled goods. Jericho paused, his jaw tight. I told him to keep his opinion on the mill floor where it belonged. It ended with a clear warning. If he or his hired hands ride onto this land, they'll be met with steel. The atmosphere shifted from romantic certainty to genuine danger. He won't leave it alone, Cora stated, walking to the window. He's too proud. He'll look for a way to break you without breaking the law. She was right. The following night, a fierce windstorm kicked up, and the next morning, Jericho found a significant portion of his north fence line, the section he'd just been working on, cut to ribbons. The posts snapped. It was not the work of wind. Lawlessness, Cora said, staring at the ruined line. He wants to scatter the herd and ruin you financially. Jericho's eyes were cold gray steel. He just made a mistake. He tried to ruin my life. Now he's attacked our life. He won't get a second chance. Instead of going to the sheriff, who they knew was in Elian's pocket, they worked. Cora discarded her bandaged feet and hauled wire, her soft hands quickly developing blisters and calluses. They patched the fence, working from sunup until the moonlight faded, fueled by cold stew and shared determination. Part 7. The Price of Freedom. The wedding took place on Wednesday afternoon. A simple affair in the same church Cora had run from, only this time, she walked down the aisle to a man who saw her as his partner. She wore a simple dress she'd sewn, pale yellow cotton. When Reverend Miller asked who gave her away, she said clearly, I give myself. The vows were brief, the rings were his parents' plain gold bands, and the kiss was slow, deep, and utterly possessive. As they walked out, husband and wife, into the bright afternoon sun, the doors burst open. Elian Mercer stood framed in the archway, flanked by two rough-looking men, his face pale with fury. You think this settles it, Thorne? Elian spat, ignoring the few guests. You think you steal what's mine and walk away clean? The north pasture is open, rancher. Your cattle are already running loose. You won't have this land long. Cora stepped forward, shielding Jericho slightly, though she knew it was futile. The land was never yours, Elian, and neither was I. Jericho gently moved her behind him. His hand went to the pistol on his hip. His eyes locked with Elian's, a stark, dangerous challenge. You came into a church on my wedding day, Jericho said, his voice quiet, controlled, yet carrying a menace that silenced the whispers. You threatened my wife and my home. The law ends here, Mercer. You and your hired hands get on your horses and ride, or you'll bleed on sacred ground. Elian's men flinched. They were thugs, not gunmen. They knew the look of a rancher protecting his claim, a man who valued his code above his life. Elian, white-knuckled and breathing hard, held the look for a moment, then swallowed his pride. He spun on his heel and stalked away, his men scrambling after him. The crisis had passed, not with a shootout, but with an uncompromising display of power and conviction. Part 8. Home. The ride back to the bar T was silent, yet electric. The danger was gone, replaced by a fierce, joyful relief. When they reached the porch, Jericho swept Cora into his arms and carried her over the threshold. "Welcome home, Mrs. Thorne," he murmured, his breath warm against her ear. They stood in the firelight, awkwardness mingling with profound intimacy. "Rock, Jericho," she corrected, smiling. "Are you as terrified as I am?" "Terrified," he confessed, pulling her closer. "But I've been thinking about this moment all day, and I'm worried I'll disappoint you." "You could never disappoint me," she promised, kissing him, a kiss that quickly turned from gentle to demanding. The night stretched long and sweet, filled with honesty and discovery. There were no expectations, only two people, utterly vulnerable and utterly certain. Years passed like water. 2 years after the wedding, a daughter arrived, Paige. 18 months later, another, Sydney. The house they once worried was too small now, hummed with life, laughter, and the ceaseless chaos of children. 8 years after she ran, Cora sat on the porch swing beside her husband, watching their daughters chase fireflies in the yard. "Do you ever think about that day?" Cora asked, leaning her head on his shoulder. "Every time I fix the north fence line," Jericho said, his thumb tracing circles on her arm. "And every time I look at those girls. If I hadn't gone to town for fence supplies that day, if I'd taken a different road home, everything is different. I used to think running away made me weak," she said, looking up at the stars. "That I was a coward for not going through with the wedding. And now, I think it was the bravest thing I've ever done. I chose my own truth over their comfort." Jericho chuckled, pulling her close. "You are a little crazy, Mrs. Thorne, but it's my favorite thing about you." Paige and Sydney, fireflies captured and released, scrambled onto the swing. "Tell us the story," Paige insisted. "How you met." Jericho began the tale, embellishing the danger and the dust, always ending the same way. "Mama ran away from the bad man who wanted to break her," he concluded, his eyes locking with Cora's, "and she found a life that she chose. The choice wasn't easy, but it was honest. When I grow up, I'm going to run away and find a husband who gives me a ranch," Paige declared. "I'm getting my own ranch," Sydney countered. "Don't need a husband." Cora and Jericho exchanged a warm, amused glance. "You've got time to figure it out," Jericho said, kissing Sydney's head. Cora looked at her husband, the man with calloused hands and steady eyes, who had given her shelter and protection, dignity, and passion. The man she had initially rejected had become her entire world. "I love you," she whispered. "I love you too," he replied, tightening his arms around her. "Even though you steal all the blankets." They sat together as the darkness deepened, their lives a testament to a truth learned on a dusty road. The most valuable property in the West wasn't a mill or a herd of cattle, but the courage to choose your own destiny.